refused to leave Vincent Moretti's mind. She was quiet, always the first to begin working, and often the last to leave. The other servants dismissed her as slow because of her full figure, laughed when she struggled with heavy laundry baskets, and rarely bothered to learn her name. She never argued. She simply smiled, apologized, and continued working. Then, one evening, security mentioned something unusual. Emma had been leaving the estate every night after her shift ended. Always alone, always taking the bus, always returning long after midnight. She never asked for extra pay, never bought anything for herself, never seemed to have a reason to disappear. Vincent couldn't ignore it any longer. Instead of sending his men, he decided to follow her himself. On a rainy night, Emma crossed half the city before stepping into a tiny family diner that looked as if it had barely survived the passing years. Minutes later, she changed into an old apron and quietly began washing dishes, clearing tables, and carrying heavy boxes until the restaurant closed. Near midnight, she counted every dollar she had earned. Then, without hesitation, she placed the entire amount into a small metal cash box and slid it toward an elderly couple waiting in the kitchen. She walked away with empty pockets. Watching from across the street, Vincent slowly lowered his eyes. He had followed Emma, expecting to uncover betrayal. Instead, he had just witnessed a kindness that would change everything he believed about the woman no one inside his own mansion had ever truly seen. Every morning, before the first lights inside the Moretti estate came to life, Emma Carter was already awake. The mansion never truly slept. Security guards changed shifts. Gardeners trimmed hedges before sunrise. Chefs prepared breakfast for dozens of employees, and somewhere among them, Emma quietly moved through the endless hallways, carrying baskets of fresh linens that seemed almost too heavy for her. She wasn't the fastest maid, nor was she the strongest. Because of her full figure, even simple tasks often looked more difficult than they were for everyone else. That was all some people needed to see. She's slowing everyone down again. I don't know why they even hired her. She'd probably finish faster if she stopped eating so much. The comments drifted through the servants' corridors almost every day. Emma heard every one of them. She never answered. Instead, she lowered her eyes, offered a small apology, even when she had done nothing wrong, and continued working. The newer employees quickly learned that making jokes at Emma's expense usually earned easy laughter from the others. Before long, joining in became part of the routine. Only a handful of people ever noticed something unusual. Whenever another servant accidentally dropped a tray, Emma was the first to help pick everything up. When someone forgot their lunch, a neatly wrapped sandwich somehow appeared inside their locker. If a uniform ripped during work, it mysteriously returned the next morning with every stitch carefully repaired. No one knew who had done it. No one bothered to ask. Kindness, after all, was much easier to ignore than mistakes. The head housekeeper, Margaret Doyle, certainly ignored it. She demanded perfection from everyone, but Emma always seemed to receive twice the criticism. Those windows still have fingerprints. The silverware isn't shining. You folded these towels incorrectly. Even when another maid had been responsible, Margaret somehow found a reason to blame Emma. She accepted every criticism with the same quiet nod. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Doyle. I'll fix it." No excuses. No complaints, no resentment. From the second floor of the mansion, Vincent Moretti occasionally witnessed these exchanges while walking toward his private office. He rarely interfered. Managing servants was beneath his concern. As long as the estate ran flawlessly, he saw no reason to involve himself in household matters. To him, Emma was simply another employee among dozens. Reliable. Invisible. Forgettable. At least, that was what he believed. One afternoon, while passing through the main hallway, Vincent noticed something unusual. A priceless porcelain vase, displayed near the grand staircase, suddenly slipped from a young maid's hands. The room froze. The vase struck the marble floor with a deafening crash. Every servant turned toward the sound. The terrified young maid immediately burst into tears. "It wasn't my fault." Before she could say another word, Margaret stormed across the hall. "Do you even know how much that vase was worth? You'll never repay this." The young woman trembled so violently she could barely breathe. Then Emma quietly stepped forward. "It was an accident," she said softly. "I was standing nearby. I should have helped carry it." Margaret stared at her. "So now it's your fault too?" Emma simply nodded. "If someone needs to take responsibility, I'll do it." Vincent watched the exchange from the staircase without saying a word. It made no sense. Emma hadn't touched the vase. Everyone in the room knew it, yet she willingly accepted blame that wasn't hers. Margaret gave her the unpleasant task of cleaning every shattered piece alone before returning to her regular duties. Not once did Emma defend herself. As the others slowly returned to work, Vincent found himself looking at her a moment longer than he intended. Not because she had spoken, but because she hadn't. There was something strangely calm about the way she accepted burdens that belonged to other people. For reasons he couldn't explain, the image stayed with him long after he reached his office. Still, he dismissed the thought. People made irrational choices every day. It meant nothing, or so he told himself. Late that evening, as the household staff prepared to clock out, one of the security supervisors approached Vincent with the daily report. Most of it was routine: supply deliveries, visitor logs, maintenance updates. Then one line caught his attention. Employee Emma Carter. Departure time 6:03 p.m. Return time 12:47 a.m. The supervisor hesitated before speaking. "Sir, this has been happening almost every night." Vincent looked up. "She leaves after every shift?" "Yes, sir. Always alone. No one knows where she goes." For a long moment, Vincent said nothing. His instincts had kept him alive for years. He had learned that people who leave. The following evening, Vincent Moretti cancelled the last item on his schedule. His advisors assumed he was preparing for another meeting with rival families. Instead, he climbed into an unmarked sedan, parked outside the estate, and waited. At exactly 6 o'clock, Emma Carter stepped through the servants' gate, carrying the same faded canvas bag she used every day. She didn't look around. She didn't check if anyone was watching. She simply walked toward the nearest bus stop. Vincent remained several cars behind. For someone who commanded an empire built on secrecy, following a single housemaid should have been effortless. Yet something about Emma made him strangely cautious. She never behaved like someone with something to hide. She never looked over her shoulder, never changed directions, never used crowded streets to lose anyone following her. She simply lived her routine. The bus carried her across neighborhoods that grew older with every passing mile. Luxury storefronts disappeared. Glass office towers gave way to aging brick buildings. Streetlights became fewer. The sidewalks were cracked. By the time Emma stepped off, the rain had begun falling. She hurried only long enough to shield an elderly woman struggling with grocery bags as they crossed the street together. When the woman thanked her, Emma smiled and continued walking. She didn't know Vincent had witnessed the entire exchange. 10 minutes later, she stopped in front of a tiny family diner, squeezed between a laundromat and a closed hardware store. Its faded sign flickered weakly against the rain. Several windows had been patched with tape. Even from his car, Vincent could see buckets placed beneath leaks in the ceiling. This wasn't a place anyone worked for good money. Emma stepped inside. Moments later, she emerged from the employee hallway, wearing an old apron that had clearly been repaired countless times. Without wasting a second, she went straight to work. She greeted every customer with the same gentle smile she wore inside the mansion. She carried heavy trays from table to table. She scrubbed greasy pans until her hands turned red. She swept the dining room. She cleaned the kitchen floor after everyone else had gone home. Not once did she complain. Several customers thanked her for staying so late. She simply bowed her head and wished them a safe trip home. Vincent watched the hours pass from inside his car. His phone vibrated repeatedly. One of his associates reminded him about a business dinner worth millions. Another informed him that several executives were already waiting. He silenced every notification. For reasons he couldn't explain, leaving no longer felt important. Around 11:30, the last customer walked out. Emma helped stack the chairs. She carried boxes of vegetables into the storage room, despite looking exhausted enough to collapse. Only after every light in the dining room had been turned off did the elderly owners invite her to sit down. The old woman placed a bowl of hot soup in front of Emma. Emma thanked her warmly. But instead of eating immediately, she quietly wrapped half of the bread in a napkin and slipped it into her canvas bag. The old couple pretended not to notice. Vincent frowned. Nothing about tonight matched the suspicions he had imagined. There were no secret meetings, no suspicious phone calls, no hidden exchanges. Just endless work. When the kitchen had finally been cleaned, the elderly man opened a small notebook and counted Emma's wages. She accepted the money with both hands. For a brief moment, Vincent thought he finally understood. Perhaps she was struggling with debt. Perhaps someone in her family needed medical treatment. Perhaps this second job was simply her way of surviving. Emma carefully counted every bill. Then, instead of placing the money inside her own wallet, she walked toward a dented metal cash box sitting on a shelf near the register. Without saying a word, she placed every dollar she had earned inside. Every single dollar. The elderly couple immediately tried to stop her. The old woman gently pushed the money back toward Emma. Emma smiled and shook her head. She quietly slid the cash box back across the counter. For nearly a minute, they softly argued. Finally, the elderly man lowered his eyes and accepted the money with visible reluctance. Emma bowed respectfully before picking up her worn canvas bag. She left the diner, carrying nothing except the half loaf of bread tucked inside. Watching from across the rain-soaked street, Vincent remained perfectly still. He had followed her expecting to expose a lie. Instead, he had uncovered a mystery that made even less sense than before. Why would a woman who owned so little work herself to exhaustion every night, only to give away every dollar she earned? For the first time in many years, Vincent realized he had no answer. And for the first time since Emma Carter entered his mansion, he wanted one. Vincent did not start the engine. Long after Emma had stepped outside the diner, he remained where he was, watching the warm lights glowing through the rain-speckled windows. Something about the way the elderly couple had tried to refuse her money wouldn't leave his mind. People didn't argue over accepting money from someone who owed them. They argued like people who couldn't bear to take from someone who had already given too much. For reasons he couldn't explain, Vincent got out of the car. He crossed the quiet street just as Emma disappeared around the corner. The bell above the diner's door rang softly as he stepped inside. The elderly couple looked surprised to see a customer so late. "We're closed, sir," the old man said politely. "I know." Vincent glanced toward the metal cash box, still resting on the counter. "I was just wondering about the young woman who worked here." The couple exchanged a quick look. "If this is about Emma," the elderly woman said carefully, "she hasn't done anything wrong." "I never said she had." There was a long silence. Vincent reached into his pocket and placed several large bills on the counter. "I'd like to buy dinner for everyone working here tomorrow." The old man smiled gently and pushed the money back. "That's kind of you, sir, but we've already received more than enough tonight." Vincent's eyes drifted once again toward the metal cash box. "From Emma?" Neither of them answered immediately. Finally, the elderly woman sighed. "We keep telling that child to stop. She never listens." Vincent frowned. "Why?" The old woman's eyes slowly filled with memories. "Because she believes she owes us something." The words hung quietly in the room. Years ago, after losing both of her parents within the same winter, Emma had nowhere to go. She had been barely 20. No relatives, no savings, no place to sleep. For weeks, she wandered the neighborhood looking for work. Most restaurants chased her away. Some wouldn't even let her finish asking. One freezing night, she stood outside this very diner, staring through the window at people eating hot meals. She never came inside. She simply stood there, hungry, too embarrassed to ask for help. The elderly owner noticed her before locking the door. He invited her in, his wife said softly. She tried to refuse. She said she had no money. So we told her. The old man smiled faintly. That washing a few dishes was enough to pay for dinner. At first, Emma came only once, then twice, eventually almost every evening. Some nights there were dishes to wash. Some nights there weren't. They fed her anyway. Winter became spring. Spring became summer. Little by little, she found temporary jobs. Then one day she stopped coming. The couple thought she had finally built a better life. They were happy for her. Until several years later, she walked back through the same door, wearing a maid's uniform. She carried a small envelope. Inside was every dollar she had earned from her first week's salary. "We refused it," the old woman said with a quiet laugh. She cried. Vincent looked up. "Cried?" The old man nodded. "She told us." His voice became almost a whisper. "When I had nothing, you fed me without asking for anything in return. If I finally have enough to stand on my own, please, let me repay every meal you ever gave me." The elderly woman smiled through tears. "We explained that kindness isn't a debt. But Emma has the strangest heart. She says promises don't disappear simply because other people forget them." Vincent stood perfectly still. Neither of them realized the effect their words were having. The old man opened the metal cash box. It wasn't filled with wealth, just neatly folded bills, small amounts, $5, $10, $20. Week after week, month after month, patiently saved by someone who earned very little herself. Sometimes, the old woman admitted quietly, she skips dinner before coming here. We pretend not to notice. If we cook too much food, she thanks us. If we cook only enough for ourselves, she tells us she's already eaten. The couple both knew she was lying. They simply loved her too much to embarrass her. Vincent lowered his gaze. He suddenly remembered the half loaf of bread she had slipped into her bag earlier that evening. It hadn't been tomorrow's breakfast. It had probably been tomorrow's only meal. For the first time in many years, Vincent felt something unfamiliar settle heavily in his chest. Inside his mansion, Emma Carter scrubbed marble floors, polished silver, and quietly accepted ridicule from people who had never missed a single meal. Then every night, she crossed the city to repay a kindness that most people would have forgotten long ago. As Vincent walked back toward his car, the rain felt colder than before, not because of the weather, but because he realized that the woman he had suspected of betrayal possessed more loyalty than almost anyone he had ever trusted. And for the first time in his life, the powerful mafia boss felt deeply ashamed that he had never truly seen the quiet young woman who had been serving under his own roof every single day. The next morning, the Moretti estate looked exactly as it always had. Servants hurried through the hallways. Gardeners trimmed the hedges. The kitchen buzzed with activity before sunrise. Nothing had changed. Except Vincent Moretti. For the first time in years, his attention wandered away from contracts, security reports, and business meetings. Instead, he found himself watching Emma Carter. Not in secret, simply noticing. He noticed that she always arrived before everyone else. He noticed that she quietly volunteered for the heaviest chores without being asked. When another maid complained about polishing silver, Emma offered to finish half of it herself. When a young kitchen assistant accidentally burned breakfast, Emma accepted the blame before the head housekeeper could begin shouting. She seemed to spend every day making life easier for everyone around her, yet no one ever thanked her. Margaret Doyle continued criticizing her as if kindness were invisible. Those floors should have been finished 20 minutes ago. Your uniform is wrinkled. You're too slow. Emma apologized each time. Vincent watched from the second-floor balcony. He knew Margaret was wrong. He also knew Emma knew she was wrong. Yet Emma never defended herself. It wasn't weakness. It was something else. Something Vincent had spent most of his life unable to understand. The ability to protect someone else's peace at the cost of your own. That afternoon, one of Vincent's senior advisors entered his office, carrying several financial reports. "The acquisition papers are ready, sir." Vincent signed them without reading. Then he asked an unexpected question. "The diner on Maple Street." His advisor looked confused. "The one beside the old laundromat." "I want to know who owns the building." Within an hour, the answer arrived. The elderly couple owned only the restaurant. The building itself belonged to an investment company that had been planning to terminate the lease within 2 months. The roof leaked. The plumbing needed replacing. Several kitchen appliances had already exceeded their expected lifespan. Financially, the diner was surviving on borrowed time. Vincent closed the report. "Buy the building." The advisor blinked. "Sir," quietly, "no one connects it to me. And the current tenants. They stay. The rent doesn't increase." The advisor hesitated. "What reason should we give them?" Vincent looked out the window for a long moment. They don't need a reason. By the end of the week, ownership had quietly changed hands. No announcement, no publicity, no signatures bearing Vincent Moretti's name. Only a construction company arriving early one morning. The workers repaired the leaking roof, replaced broken pipes, installed new refrigerators and stoves. Even the faded restaurant sign was restored. The elderly owners stood outside, watching the repairs in disbelief. They repeatedly asked who had paid for everything. The project manager simply smiled. Someone wanted to thank people who never stopped being kind. That evening, Emma arrived for her second job and froze in front of the diner. The buckets that had once collected rainwater were gone. Fresh lights glowed through clean windows. Inside, the kitchen looked almost new. She turned to the elderly couple in confusion. "What happened?" They laughed softly. "We don't know. Some miracle finally found this old place." Emma smiled with genuine relief. Not once did she wonder whether the miracle had anything to do with her. Across the street, inside a parked black sedan, Vincent watched silently. He expected to feel satisfied. Instead, he noticed something else. Emma wasn't excited because the restaurant looked nicer. She was happy because the elderly couple no longer had to worry. That realization lingered with him long after he drove away. But not everyone inside the mansion failed to notice Vincent's growing attention. Margaret Doyle had begun watching as well. She noticed Vincent occasionally asking where Emma had been assigned for the day. She noticed him interrupting meetings whenever reports about the household crossed his desk. Most of all, she noticed something she had never seen before. Whenever Emma entered a room, Vincent looked up. It wasn't obvious. It lasted only a second. But Margaret saw it, and she reached the only conclusion jealousy would allow. A quiet maid was trying to gain the boss's attention. Within days, whispers spread through the servants' quarters. They say the boss has started noticing Emma. No wonder she's always pretending to be so innocent. I knew she was acting. Emma heard every rumor, just as she had heard every insult before. She lowered her head, said nothing, and quietly continued working. Watching from a distance, Vincent finally understood something that no intelligence report could ever have taught him. Sometimes, the cruelest people were not enemies carrying weapons. They were ordinary people who chose to wound someone who had never hurt them at all. The rumors inside the mansion refused to disappear. If anything, they grew louder with each passing day. Whenever Emma Carter entered the servants' dining hall, conversations stopped. When she walked away, whispers began again. She knows exactly what she's doing. No maid gets the boss's attention without a reason. I always thought she looked too innocent. Emma never defended herself. She simply carried her tray to the smallest table in the corner, finished her meal quietly, and returned to work before anyone else. Only one person seemed pleased by the growing hostility: Margaret Doyle. From the beginning, she had ruled the household through fear and unquestioned authority. Now, for the first time, someone else's quiet presence was changing the atmosphere inside the mansion. She couldn't control Vincent Moretti, but she could make Emma's life unbearable. Over the following weeks, Emma received the most difficult assignments every single day. She was ordered to clean the outdoor courtyard during heavy rain. She polished guest rooms long after midnight. Whenever another servant made a mistake, Margaret somehow found a way to add the extra work to Emma's schedule. Still, Emma never complained. One evening, Vincent happened to pass through the laundry room. He stopped without being seen. Emma sat alone beside a sewing machine, carefully repairing several torn Maid uniforms. One belonged to a young employee who had accidentally ripped it while carrying furniture. Another had worn sleeves that no longer matched. Emma stitched every piece by hand. Not her own uniform, everyone else's. Vincent looked toward the clock. Her shift had already ended almost an hour earlier, yet she remained behind, working without pay, simply so the others wouldn't have to spend money replacing their uniforms. He quietly walked away before she noticed him. That night, he cancelled another dinner with investors. Instead, he drove past the diner. Through the front window, he watched Emma laughing softly with the elderly couple as they prepared tomorrow's vegetables together. It wasn't the laughter of someone pretending everything was fine. It was the simple happiness of being with people who made her feel she belonged. For the first time in many years, Vincent realized he envied something money had never been able to buy: a place where someone waited for you simply because they cared. The following morning, an envelope appeared on Margaret Doyle's desk. Inside was a neatly folded resignation letter. Margaret smiled. She had expected this day. Without opening it, she personally delivered the envelope to Vincent's office. "I believe one of the maids has decided she no longer wishes to work here." Vincent looked down. "Emma Carter." He opened the letter slowly. There were no complaints, no accusations, no requests for compensation, only a few simple lines. "Thank you for allowing me to work in this home. I apologize if I have ever caused inconvenience to anyone. I hope my resignation will bring more peace to the household." Vincent read the final sentence twice. Emma wasn't leaving because she had been treated unfairly. She was leaving because she believed her presence had become a burden to everyone else. He folded the letter carefully, then stood. Minutes later, every servant inside the mansion was called to the dining hall. Confused whispers spread across the room. Vincent almost never appeared in the servants' quarters. Margaret stood confidently near the front, convinced the boss was simply there to approve the resignation. Emma remained near the back of the room, her head lowered. Vincent walked to the center without speaking. The room fell completely silent. He looked once at the letter in his hand. Then, slowly, he tore it cleanly in half. The sound of paper ripping echoed through the room. No one moved. No one breathed. Vincent calmly looked around at every servant before his eyes finally rested on Emma. His voice was quiet, but every word carried through the hall. Emma Carter works in this house because she has earned my trust. He paused. And as long as she chooses to stay, no one will make that choice for her. Silence swallowed the room. Margaret's confident expression disappeared. Several servants immediately lowered their eyes. Emma herself looked up in stunned disbelief. For the first time since arriving at the Moretti estate, someone had not merely shown her kindness. Someone had stood in front of everyone and chosen to protect her. The morning after Vincent publicly defended Emma, the mansion seemed quieter than usual. No one dared whisper when she walked by. But Margaret Doyle had no intention of accepting defeat. Before sunrise, she unlocked the office where the mansion's annual charity fund was kept. She removed several envelopes filled with cash, slipped them into a laundry bag, then quietly placed the empty envelopes inside Emma Carter's locker. An hour later, Margaret's voice echoed through the servants' quarters. "The charity money is gone." Panic spread instantly. Every locker was searched. When Emma's locker was opened, the empty envelopes fell onto the floor. Gasps filled the room. Several servants immediately stepped away from her. Margaret folded her arms. "I trusted you." Emma looked at the envelopes in silence. She knew she had never touched them. But after weeks of rumors, she also knew that no explanation would change anyone's mind. Before she could speak, Vincent entered the room. No one noticed how calm he looked. His eyes moved from Margaret to the envelopes, then to Emma. Finally he spoke. "No one leaves." The room froze. Margaret forced a confident smile. "Sir, the evidence is obvious." Vincent looked at her without emotion. "Is it?" He nodded once toward the security chief. "Play yesterday's recording." A large monitor lit up. The room watched in stunned silence as the footage revealed Margaret entering the office alone before dawn. Moments later, she appeared again, carrying the envelopes directly to Emma's locker. Not a single word was spoken. Margaret's face turned pale. Within minutes, security escorted her out of the mansion. As the doors closed behind her, several servants slowly turned toward Emma. One by one, they lowered their heads. No apology could erase what they had done. Emma simply smiled. "It's all right." She meant it. That evening, Vincent drove Emma to the little diner. The elderly couple greeted them warmly, insisting they stay for dinner. While serving soup, the old man laughed softly. "You know, if Emma hadn't skipped so many meals over the years, we would have had a much harder time keeping this place open." Vincent looked up. "Skipped meals?" Emma lowered her eyes. It wasn't important. The elderly woman gently shook her head. "She always told us she'd already eaten. But we knew she hadn't. She wanted us to keep every extra dollar." For the first time in years, Vincent found himself unable to speak. He quietly turned toward the rain-speckled window, hiding the emotion in his eyes. Months passed. The little diner became one of the busiest restaurants in the neighborhood. The roof never leaked again. The kitchen was filled with new equipment. Customers lined up outside every weekend. No one knew the building now belonged to Vincent Moretti. Emma continued working there every Saturday evening, not because she needed the money, but because some promises were never meant to end. Late one evening, after the restaurant closed, Emma stepped outside carrying her familiar canvas bag. Waiting beside the curb was the same black sedan. Vincent stood beside it, holding 2 warm takeout boxes. He smiled gently. "You skipped dinner again." Emma laughed, slightly embarrassed. "I got busy." He opened the passenger door. "Then let's eat on the way home." She climbed into the car. As the city lights drifted past the windows, Emma realized something she had never expected to find. For years, she had spent every evening making sure someone else would never feel alone. Now, for the first time in her life, someone was quietly waiting for her to come home.